Ever notice how there's this constant chatter in your head, second-guessing your decisions? That voice telling you the next promotion, the next city, the next relationship will finally make you feel complete. Here's the thing, that voice isn't actually you. It's this inner roommate that's probably keeping you from truly connecting with who you are at your core. Hi, I'm Shang. On this channel, I share strategies and tools that bring us closer to the best versions of ourselves. Today, I'm sharing 3 epiphany maps that's helped me, and now my coaching clients, cut through the mental noise to identify what that roommate voice is saying and how it's holding you back. Discover your true essential self beneath all the achievements. And finally, let go of old patterns keeping you stuck. Towards the end of the video, I'll show you how to use these epiphanies to guide your daily decisions in what I call the aligned life. If you're ready to free yourself from that inner chatter and rediscover your essential self, these maps are going to be game-changing. Let's dive in. Before we start, let me give you a sense of what epiphany mapping is. This is a visual thinking method that allows you to dig deep within yourself without the constraints of linear writing. It literally captures whatever it is that comes to your mind. Because if you think about the way that the mind works, it's very chaotic. You have these random thoughts, sometimes a long train of thought, sometimes a brilliant epiphany, but it's anything but linear like a book. With mapping, the power lies in its non-linearity and its ability to just capture these experiences, these thoughts as they come. And that's phenomenally powerful because today we're talking about these inner voices as well as something as complex as who am I? In my experience, regular journaling, you're gonna take at least a couple of weeks or an entire notebook to even fill out the contents of one of these maps. That's just how efficient epiphany mapping is. What you need is just a piece of paper, like any freaking notebook. That's all you need. It's that simple. And an erasable pen. I like using the Pilot Friction pens, a black 0.5 and a red 0.5. Why erasable? Because it turns any piece of paper into a whiteboard. And sometimes you've got to be able to move things around, especially when you first start mapping. You just want to go ham. Use a big piece of paper. I've been mapping for a while, so I'm okay with using a small, like traveler's notebook like this. But I highly recommend any beginners to use as big of a piece of paper so you don't have to worry about the actual space. These 3 maps are based on both life experience as well as some of the books that have influenced me. So recently, one of my good friends, Daniel, had gifted me Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul. He was like, hey Shang, I think given this current life stage, I think this is going to be really useful for you. And I had brought it with me on one of my solo camping trips into the desert. And I'm so glad I brought that book because once I flipped to the introduction and the first chapter, I got hooked. And I would say the best chapter in that entire book is chapter 1 or 2, literally about the voice. This voice that is in our heads, what Michael calls the roommate. We're walking around with this roommate occupying our minds. For most people that I found, it's a source of self-doubt and second guessing. Basically, he recommends that, hey, go through an entire day and really pay attention to when and where your inner voice, your inner roommate is talking to you. Me being an epiphany mapper, I can map this out. And because I was in the desert with so much stillness and silence, that was a perfect environment because the voice was particularly loud. As we go through modern life, there's just so much stimulus. You're watching the news, you're working on your computer, you're calling up friends. Often we can't even recognize what is our true selves and our own voice versus the voice, the roommate talk. The two just kind of blends together into one big mesh. So let me share with you what I had mapped out. This looks a bit messy, right? And it's because it is. This is the chaotic roommate talk that is constantly going into my head. This is what I like to do with every epiphany map, which is, this is the central node, the map that I am working on. This is the central topic, which is roommate talk today. I like putting a date here just so that I know what was it that I was mapping or thinking or felt like during this particular period in time. Epiphany mapping is a form of visual journaling. And then what extends out, what I call the major nodes. You have your yesterday, you have your right now, and then you have your general. And the power of epiphany mapping is its ability to deconstruct complexity. Because if you just go off, random thoughts and stuff like that, it gets really messy very quickly. So I like to introduce just a little bit of hierarchy, whatever I can think of in the beginning, so that we have a little bit of order to frame the chaos that we're about to go into. And don't worry if this looks a little bit messy, because I'm going to walk you through it. So yesterday, this was essentially me going into camp. I was flying the drone to capture some car shots through Death Valley and Mojave Desert. And I was like, I'm learning to fly again. Oh yeah, by the way, I use black in order to highlight voice thoughts. And then the red annotation is where the voice has been wrong. So this map is really useful in identifying not only the instances of the voice coming up, but also when it led me astray, which is pretty often. And I think that's actually Michael Singer's point, is that if you keep on listening to the voice, which is not your own, basically going to be constantly led down these suboptimal routes that doesn't really serve you. Here, what I have is campsite selection. Once I got to a campsite, my voice immediately was like, oh, campsite number 3, which is the one that I booked, is the worst of the 4 sites. Because I took a look around, I was like, oh, I should have gotten campsite 4, and it was like, had more privacy, and it's facing the wrong direction. It's not close enough to the rocks. What ended up happening was that I kept on moving the car back and forth, trying to get in position for like a whole freaking hour, instead of just like enjoying the campsite. There was nobody around, so it didn't really matter which site that I had. It's really silly. It's already showing me that my perfectionism and this lack of contentment with the present is showing in the voice. I already have what I want. It's in front of me. That's how insidious the voice is. The reason why Singer noted it as like a madman or a mad woman inside of us is because it'll change its direction on a drop of a dime. In one moment, if let's say a girl or a guy that somebody you're dating doesn't call you or text you, you're already projecting, oh no, what did I do? And I hate this person. He or she is making me feel bad. And as soon as they text you back, you're back in love. Oh man, this person is so cool. I want to hang out with them, and I can see a whole life in front of me with this person. This is the roommate talk map. And once you're able to break out all the instances of this inner dialogue, you're gonna see, number 1, how common it is. Number 2, how crazy it is. And then finally, all the instances where it's just either wasting your time or leading you down some pretty bad routes. And this is not just isolated to me. In my alignment coaching work with individuals, I often come across other people who have identified this voice as not their own. It could be your dad's voice or your mom's voice. And every time you're doing something that is very empowering for you, that's really good for you, their voice of judgment essentially comes up in the back of your mind, and it's questioning what it is that you're doing. Which means that in this process, we've got to identify who it is we are ourselves, as well as what are these separate voices that's happening in your head. Now we're going to move into the Who Am I map. The first map that we did was what's not us. This one is what is truly us. What I like to do with Epiphany Mapping is to put the question that I'm trying to answer right in the middle. Because the power of Epiphany Mapping is its ability to deconstruct complexity, and doesn't get more complex than trying to figure out who we really are. And what you'll notice here is that with the major nodes, I kind of went across the board. I like to think in terms of symbols because they are rich encapsulations of meaning that I can recall on a daily basis. Because if you don't remember something, if it doesn't actually resonate with you, it's basically useless. That's why I think symbols are so powerful. You'll see here that you can use anything that kind of feels like you, represents you. I've got an animal like the ibex. I've got different colors. I have books, philosophies, art, my journals, as well as even Gen keys, which is like astrology-based human design. Because to me, I'm extremely philosophy agnostic. The main thing is, does it resonate with me? Does it have any guidance value? And that's why it's so important to use Epiphany Mapping in a nonlinear way to just jot down whatever comes to mind that you feel represents who you are based on your lived experience. So let's go through a few of mine. My spirit animal, as I like always to say, is the ibex. This is a type of mountain goat that lives in the Alps. And 2 years ago, when I was doing a 100-mile hike, basically around Mont Blanc, I saw a family ibex up in the high cliffs. And I decided to follow them up the cliff just to see how they see the world. And this is very much me because I love taking advantage view of any kind of situation. It doesn't matter if it's parade, movement, or a new project. I always climb to the highest point and take an aerial eagle view of the landscape. So I know where things stand before descending the mountain and then immersing myself in the ground level chaos. So Ibex really represents me. And there's even colors. My 3 colors are black, which represents what I call the void, silver or steel, which is purity and practicality, and then brown, which is the earth, nature. These are pretty abstract things, but they are my true self. I feel a resonance with them. The Tao Te Ching, which is the most influential book in the last 5 years for me. It was recommended by one of my mentors who really knows me. And he was like, Shang, based on your writing, based on your videos, based on your love for nature, you were probably a Taoist monk in your past life. And that piqued my interest. I was like, hey, why don't I pick up the Tao Te Ching and give it a shot? And it blew my world wide open. I'll probably do a video at some point about it to do it justice, but the number one concept I got from that was effortless living. Life doesn't have to be complicated or hard. It could actually be the opposite. We make life hard and complicated. And effortless living, it's like, how can I do less? How can I solve or even dissolve my problems without doing a single thing? And often these days, if something feels really difficult, it doesn't matter if it's making a video, a client project, a relationship, if it feels like it's pulling teeth, it's like completely weighing me down and giving me tons of burden, that's usually a sign for me to slow down, pause, and think, is there a different approach? Is my strategy off? Is the mindset that I'm approaching this the wrong way? Because often so much of the burdens in our life is self-created. Of course, we can't prevent the circumstances of life from happening, but we can control the way that we approach them and lessen our burdens that way. So life is meant to be effortless, not necessarily easy. That's a key difference. Last year, I also took a sabbatical to Taiwan, which is nothing short of life-changing. So what that taught me is that I want to live a life of adventure. I love nature, randomness, change, and freedom. I also met a girl named Alice who really left an impression on me. She just brought out like the most spontaneous, fun side of me. If you know me, I'm like serious, deadpan serious often. And it just felt really natural. And it's not just a person, but the energy. Nowadays, I look to surround myself with people that bring out this naturalness, this spontaneity essentially in me that makes life more fun and meaningful. Journaling, that's what I got out of that. And it tells me a lot about myself and what I'm looking for, my true essential self. And then finally, we have Jin Keys, which at some point I'll probably make a ChatGPT AI video around how to use AI in order to make use of these personality tests and create your personal coach. But what I got out of that was 3 elements also, which is expansion. It's part of my nature to keep on expanding and transcending everything that I create. Strength, which is the solidity of resolve. There's a groundedness to my approach to life. And then rapture. I literally live to experience more moments of rapture when I feel this like profound connectedness to everything and everyone around me. That's what brings me joy. In fact, creating this video brings me to that point too. It's truly a privilege to be able to share some of these lessons and these ideas with you. Detachment. Again, this is covered by the Tao Te Ching, so I'm going to draw an arrow right here. We're able to start making these connections. And what I like to do is I like to see where arrows are either connecting or originating from. That's going to look fundamentally different for you, and that's why it's so important to actually map this out for yourself. I think it's really important once you make a map like this to write out linearly the insights that you got out of it. So for me, every sprint, I must do something aligned with my nature and essential self that pushes me outside my comfort zone. Because part of my nature is expansion, which means that if I stay within my comfort zone, I'm gonna die inside, which means that I have to constantly push. Here, you'll see this additional note, which is expansion inwardly is even more important. When I was younger, I was hopping around new countries in Europe every single weekend when I was living in London. We're doing 220 miles in the John Muir Trail in 12 days. I was just incessantly moving in the physical world and exploring, which is really awesome. I really enjoyed it. But these days, I find that my biggest mountains to be climbed are internal. There is an inner world that is like endlessly fascinating to me now. So expansion is also inner cultivation, not just outward exploration. The words that you will come up for yourself are probably going to be a bit different. If you need some help with identifying what your symbols are, give me a ring. I literally made a 30-minute webinar that breaks down my process of discovering your essential self in just 3 steps. Take a look at that, because honestly, it took me years and months to get to this point, and there's definitely shortcuts to be had, and more than happy to share those. The final one, and probably the most important, as the sun is now glaring at me and hopefully it kind of shifts a little bit, it's not too bright, guys, is what must die. There's this concept that Bruce Lee shared in the book, Be Water, My Friend, which is he actually made this poster of a tombstone. And on top of the tombstone, there was a set of attributes that he just wanted to leave behind, and it just needed to be dead and buried so that he can continue evolving himself as a human being. That's what it means. What must die? Immaturity. Again, comfort zone. If I stay within my comfort zone, I'm expanding this out right here, I'm gonna dry up. Immaturity, for me, actually also shows up as avoidance. Avoidance of what? We have responsibility, we've got conflict. Here, what it manifests is resistance to change, controlling the outcomes, and dishonesty to myself, being dishonest to myself. The second one is force. Force is not strength. Force is pushy energy. Basically, every time that I've used force in my life, things have backfired. What's much better is to stand firm on my beliefs, but not necessarily like push the results essentially forward. That uses a lot of energy, and it's actually going against like the flow of the river. And I realized this with a lot of what I've done around content. I went through a period of time where I was trying to force results. So much of force and so much of the things I'm trying to force is often because I'm having a lot of expectations. I want to make a differentiation between expectations versus standards. I think it's very important to have standards in our lives, but it's a different story to try to crave external validation. That's what actually expectations is. It's a manifestation of my ego. There are these external success metrics. Let's say the amount of subscribers I got, the amount of revenue that I get from consulting, coaching, how many people that I have like onboarded, as well as seeking approval and validation from admirers, right? Like fans or my family or what have you, as well as acknowledgement. The first 2 years of YouTube was extremely difficult because my entire family, my parents were super against me. The people in my community, sometimes friends, didn't really understand why or what I was talking about, why I was going on to YouTube. My dad literally told me that sharing mind mapping was going to harm people, and it hurt. It hurt a lot, but you just kind of keep going, right? And I think this entire journey has been letting go of external validation as well as expectation. Every time I let go of the expectation and did things out of true enjoyment and because I wanted to, it just invariably, the results were better. And part of expectation, I realized, is this need for things to happen in a particular way or time. If you think about it, it comes from a place of scarcity. Every time that I have a need for things to happen in a particular way, it's because I feel like good things are not going to happen to me, and therefore I need to lock this down ASAP. When we do things out of scarcity, you're going to be so stressed that your productivity itself and enjoyment of what you do completely takes a hit. And it's no surprise that the outcomes are going to be suboptimal. What I got from this map, as you see in the red annotations, again, extremely important. If I tackle expectation, out of all of these, I would say expectation is my number one enemy that must die. Mainly because if I'm able to tackle expectation, I basically hit 2 birds with 1 stone, which is ego and scarcity. And this is why it's so important to map these things out. If you can't put a face to your enemy, you're just going to be fighting an invisible enemy constantly. The fact that in my epiphany mapping, I've flushed them out means that every time I feel like these shadows are rearing their like ugly heads, I'm gonna be able to go back to this map and start practicing my shadows away. Let me show you a map that I recently made because I realized that all 3 of these were like starting to creep up a little bit. And here's a bonus map. Number 4 is practice shadows away. And you can see here, I have the main node, which is this, and this was made 2 weeks after this particular map. Again, maps build on top of each other. That's the power of them. Use them as a visual tool and reference tool you can actually pull out at a later time. So we have immaturity, we have expectation, then we have force. And then I mapped out the different times in which they manifested. I'm not gonna go through this map right now, but I just wanted to show you how I utilize different maps across time on a daily basis, because they put front and center these things that I must be aware of for my personal growth and to be able to keep the voice in check, practice my shadows away, and then finally discover and listen to my true self. If you want to learn more about my process and everything that I've learned over the last 10 years on this journey, I've distilled them down into a 3-step process that I put into a free masterclass in the link below. So definitely check that out. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time.